At this time, we'd like to introduce the member from Memramcook-Tantramar virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And although I'm joining virtually, I want to thank the minister and his team for being there this afternoon. I've been listening in, and I spoke at second reading, so just like my colleague from Kent North, I'm going to jump into some questions to try to get through them during my allotted time. I guess I'll start by talking about the municipalities of Sackville and Dorchester. And the communities here are definitely feeling blindsided by the forced amalgamation that's presented in these plans. And I guess there are two different elected councils that are really concerned and opposed with this merger. I'm wondering if the minister will consider revisiting the boundaries proposed for Entity 40. That's what's being proposed for these two municipalities and the LSDs. And I know there was a lot of consultation that happened leading up to the white paper, but will the minister pause and consult more on what's being proposed for Entity 40?
Monsieur le Président, to the member from Sackville-Tantramar, as I indicated in question period today, we have been moving forward with a white paper. It's a plan for New Brunswick for local governance reform. We've been in discussion for the past year. We will be transitioning for another year. So that's 2 years of local governance reform. The member today from Fredericton Grand Lake had it's a great question. But there is concerns. We'll be taking time to answer those concerns. But when we look at Sackville, Dorchester, the federal government will be investing over $500 million in that entity. I can tell you, I have confidence in that entity. That entity will have capacity to govern itself. They've got great staff in Sackville, so there's capacity there also to help Dorchester. I have confidence in the people of Sackville, Dorchester, to make this entity like no other. So for myself, like other communities across New Brunswick, yes, there are some concerns and questions. Change is hard. Change is not easy. However, we all knew that we were going to reduce the number of entities by April 6th in the Green Paper, and that's why we need to move forward. And that's why I have confidence in the people of Sackville, Dorchester. There's great elected officials there. With a great transition leader, we'll take the time to consult, we'll take the time to answer the questions, and we'll take the time to have a great plan for the Tantramar region.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister, I think that change absolutely is hard. That's a reality of life. It's even harder when the change feels like it's coming out of left field, and I think that's what's happened in my riding. And I'm very proud of the people from Memramcook-Tantramar and the people in Sackville and Dorchester, and absolutely they have capacity and they care a lot about their local governments. And Sackville, in fact, definitely exceeds the qualifications for being viable, and so. And they specifically said they didn't want amalgamation. And so I think that what's happening is that the people in my area are feeling that their voices have not been heard. And they are specifically, there's real worries about what's going to happen with the transition. Democracy is such an important value and local decision making, and there's concerns about it being diluted, and so I guess I'm wondering, what will the role of elected officials be in the transition? I've heard the minister answer questions about this, but I'm trying to establish what powers will elected officials still have in this process? Are they guaranteed to have a voice and decision-making power in the transition process?
Thank you, Mr. President, to the member of Member Cook-Tantramar. So, voices were heard. Voices, I met, I think, in July, for over 3 hours, the mayors of Port Elgin, the mayors of Sackville, the mayors of Dorchester, and the mayor of Memramcook. We had a great discussion. We talked about restructurings at that meeting. The Finn report in 2008 talked about restructurings also. So it took us 12 years to understand the Finn report, so that's not bad. But we now know to be more viable, to make sure that we don't lose any services, we don't lose infrastructure, or we don't lose economic development opportunities, we have to collaborate and work together. The role of the transition leaders, as we indicated, a facilitator will be appointed by the transition team to the new entity of Sackville Dorchester. Elected officials will be part of these committees. There's an advisory committee and a committee on personnel or human resources. Elected officials will lead this transition, will lead to make sure that the boundaries are set, will lead on the naming of the community on the 1st of July, and will lead to make sure that the regulations are right for that area. They are duly elected officials that will have a great role, I hope, in nurturing this process through this transition. Thank you, Mr. President. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister. Some of the concern that I'm hearing comes from looking at the Bill 82, and that the minister may have the power to do quite a few things in terms of the transition, and there's still a lot of questions about what's going to happen with this transition team. I'm wondering who will have the last say, and what happens if the transition facilitator wants to do something, or the minister wants to do something, and there's a disagreement. Is there an arbitration process if the elected councillors disagree with what's being proposed in terms of the transition?
Mr. Chair, to the MLA, transition quite a few things. If you can enumerate, maybe that'll be help us. However, on certain questions, so let's take on the naming of the municipality. The facilitator will sit down with municipal councils, both municipal councils. If there's people from LSDs, they'll be part of that advisory committee at the same time. They will come on consensus. We are all grown-ups. We are all great New Brunswickers that want to see and improve our community. So we'll work on collaboration. I think we've used the word collaboration. From there, if the facilitator needs some help, he has access to 4 individuals that have been named transition chairs. We have Gérard Béliveau, who is the actual RSC of Southeast. We have Lise Ouellette, who is the former executive director of the l'Association des francophones Municipalities de Nouveau-Brunswick. We have the Deputy Minister, Ryan Donaghy, from local governments, and we have the ADM, Jennifer Wilkins. So these individuals will play a role. And if at that point we have no consensus, I can definitely step in and maybe alleviate all these concerns. So to the MLA, to the chair, I can assure you that this transition process is not about the department, it's not about the minister, it's about communities making sure that they make the right decisions and they collaborate and they cooperate on certain issues. If there's specific issues or points that you think there's concerns, please don't hesitate to share.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you to the Minister for explaining what that process would look like. And then ultimately, I guess the Minister said that he would be able to step in, and that's what we see in the legislation, that the Minister may have the power. I'm looking at page 104 in the English document 11.2. Minister may, with respect to an incorporation, amalgamation, annexation, or decrease into territorial limits affected in a regulation referred to in subsection 9.1, and then it lists A to let me see, H, different things, everything from preparing a transitional budget to including, tax rates, undertaking negotiation of collective agreements. I guess what it comes down to, the question is, does the minister have the final say if the elected officials don't agree with what's being proposed? Is it looks from the legislation that would be the case. Can the minister confirm that?
Mr. Chair, to the member. So the process, which has been elaborated, so hence we are here to debate the merits of Bill 82. Once this bill is passed, let's hope later this week, then we can start on the transition team, can start appointing the facilitators to the different transition teams. The transition teams will be working as indicated on boundaries, council composition, salaries, naming of, etc. From there, that will create the contents of decision-making in regulations. These regulations will be made collaboratively with consensus. However, we don't want to have paralysis neither. So hence the reason why the department, the minister has a role to move the file move forward. Once that's done, the contents of the regulation are given to the department. From there, the department provides it to cabinet. And from cabinet, that's how we move forward. And we need to have done those regulations by the 30th of August, 2022, so we can have the special elections in November 28, 2022, to make sure these new councils are in place by the 1st of January 2023.
My apologies, I was muted. Thank you to the minister through the chair. I guess moving on, I'm wondering how will separate municipal budgets, there's assets and debts as well coming from different municipalities, but how will different budgets be managed within the new entity? So in this case, there's going to be multiple local service districts and separate municipalities coming together.
Mr. Chair, to the MLA. So municipal budgets. So again, managing the financial side of it, assets. It's an accounting practice. It's totally normal. We do it every day. Debts and resources will stay with the entity it originated from. So hence the reason why we'll have variable tax rates. It exists today in numerous municipalities that there is variable tax rates in municipalities. And again, it's an accounting exercise, and we hope that we can collaborate to work on assets, to better manage our assets in the entities, so we can find efficiencies and reduce duplication.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister, roads are something that I know are always an important issue when we talk about municipalities, when we talk about really anything. And I understand that the intention is for the province to continue to maintain the roads that are currently in LSDs, even in a new entity that is joining LSDs to municipalities. I'm wondering how that will work in terms of budgeting and in terms of decision making. So will it stay the same as it is right now, with the basically DTI having the final say, or will there be some change in terms of decision making power for people who live in those areas?
Mr. Chair, to the MLA from Memramcook Tender Power. So roads, 1.3 in the white paper, Responsibility for Roads. Roads have been a great barrier for restructurings in the last 40 years. So hence the reason why we're talking about it. It's always the elephant in the room. Madam MLA, I think you're a great advocate for Route 16, I think, in your area riding. I've heard it more than once. And we, as politicians, always like talking about roads. So it's an important infrastructure for our regions. And I think you're right in saying that the DTI has the final say. It's their responsibility. However, these new entities, I hope, will have a better collaboration with DTI. We have a minister of DTI who's open and wants to definitely listen to New Brunswickers. And I think we've loved to criticize DTI sometimes, but I think we have to work with them also. So I think these new entities, our objective is to make sure that we collaborate and we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the minister, through you, Mr. Chair. I guess what I'm not seeing anywhere is that there will actually be guaranteed decision-making power or even an increase. I hear hope for collaboration. However, I do have significant concerns that people in these areas will still have their roads neglected. And as I've talked about Route 16, the minister is right. Route 16 gets neglected, and it's a major route. So I do have concerns about that, but I'm looking at the clock, so I'm going to move on to ask about something that my colleague from Kent North was asking about in terms of rural districts and decision making. I'm wondering, in terms of what's being laid out, it looks like people in rural districts are not going to have the final say. It looks like the minister would have the final say, similar to how it is now in LSDs when it comes to projects. I'm wondering if the minister can confirm that this is true, that there will basically be an advisory role for people in rural districts, but they won't have final decision-making power around the planning and around projects in their area. And I'm not just talking about Crown lands. I'm talking about general land use planning.
So, Mr. Chair, to the MLA, so I want to come back to roads. I think we have to realize that I cannot guarantee. My wife always says something, you can't guarantee things in life. So I'm not, however, I'm really confident, I'm an optimist, that there is going to be a better collaboration between newly minted elected rural officials and the new entities also with DTI. Which brings me to your question. In rural districts, we've been advocating that they wanted elected officials for the last 60 years. They've been advocating through actually a legitimate process to elections in New Brunswick. So we will have about, let's not quote me on this one, but 43 elected rural district councillors. These councillors will be legitimately voted by the population and duly elected. They'll have access to staff, they'll have a salary, they'll be working on, they'll have a seat at the RSC level. So they will be able to have a say for the first time on their lives, on the quality of life they want, but on their planning. Yes, they will continue to be an advisor to the minister. However, I think things will change moving forward. Evolution will dictate that these individuals will have definitely a say because they're elected officials now. They'll have instruments, tools to help them also. They'll be knowledgeable on what's going on the planning level, on the expenses. For the first time in the history of New Brunswick, LSD budgets were on the website of environmental local government. We didn't have access. We could not compare Haut-Chipagan with Brighton, Northampton with Pointe-du-Chêne. People had, Mr. Chair, had access to those numbers. So we hope, and I'm really confident, in the evolution of these district councillors, that they will have a say, and the minister will listen to them.
Thank you to the minister through the chair. And as I said at second reading, there are many of my constituents, and I know people across the province who, as the minister has stated, did not have elected representatives, and that is absolutely a problem. One of the things that comes up in rural areas is a lack of environmental protection, a lack of say about what projects happen in their areas. And as it stands, I'm noticing it looks like from the map that's in the white paper is not as detailed as I'm hoping that there will be other ones coming out, but it looks like Calhoun, for example, is in a rural district, and there are quarries there. And as it stands, people there don't want more quarries, but I know that the minister has approved one. I'm wondering, will there be a difference in how things work? It sounds like there's still only going to be an advisory role for people even when they're elected there, and that the minister will be able to supersede and decide, what projects go forward, even when people might not want that in their communities. And so that's really the concern that I have around, it's positive to have more representation, but I'm still concerned that there's going to be a lack of local decision making ultimately.
Mr. Chair, to the MLA, these new rural district councillors will have a say. I just enumerated them, but it's really important to come back and look at the Finn report, puis le rapport de temps d'agir de l'Association francophone des municipalités du Nouveau-Brunswick. Whereas it indicated, Finn looked at municipal governance as urban, suburban, and rural. And early in this process, I indicated to the member of Kent North a few minutes ago, we found out that people in rural New Brunswick really had a pride for rural New Brunswick. And people in rural New Brunswick have a different view on New Brunswick than people in suburban and urban, which is totally normal. So that's why, hence the reason why we felt that we should keep rural New Brunswick rural. I definitely, in the planning part, I've said it many times, fishery, farming, forestry have developed this province. Farming, I have questions from farmers every day. We've exploited the resources for the last 20 years. How do we do it for the next 20 years? To the member opposite, we'll have to do it in an environmentally friendly way. However, we have to put the tools for them. So I think that's where people will have a say. They'll have newly, for the last 60 years, 30% of the population that live in rural New Brunswick did not have access to a legitimate individual elected through elections in New Brunswick. So we hope that the next special elections, that these individuals will have access to an individual who can have a say in their quality of life. Regarding the development of resources, look, we've listened to the population. We try to find a balance. We still need to do economic development and resource development in our region. So as a department, we try to find that balance. We listen to people, we listen to business, and we try to move forward. So I think that's where we're moving forward on that one, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, the chair. I guess I think that everyone agrees there does need to be municipal reform, but I think that there just are some still some concerns, some adjustments that might need to be made, and I guess I still do have some concern around some of the changes that will be made in my riding, and whether there will be how that's going to play out. And I hope the minister will listen to the concerns as expressed. Team for, excuse me, I want to thank the minister and his team for answering my questions, and that's all from me for today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This time, I'd like to introduce the member from Fredericton Grand Lake and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you,